history of the unknowns, and please take a seat, get comfortable. The history of the unknowns begins with the U.S. involvement in World War I from 1917 to 1918. Now, France and Great Britain were the first two countries who actually elected a service member to represent all of those who remain unidentified from the war. The United States was third to follow suit. Now, their selection process for the United States actually took place in France. The individual who made that selection process was known as Sergeant Edward F. Younger. He's actually currently buried here in Section 18. When Sergeant Edward F. Younger was doing the selection process, what they did was they exhumed one American from each of the 4 American cemeteries in France, gathered all of the caskets together within the town hall in Chalon-sur-Marne. Sergeant Edward F. Younger was the only one to actually enter that town hall, closed the doors behind himself, and walked in. Now, what he had was a spray of white roses in his hand, which he placed on the 3rd casket from the left, after walking around them 3 times, signifying his selection of the World War I unknown. Shortly after that selection process, the World War I was loaded onto the USS Olympia. Now, you are more than welcome to take any photo or video of anything but the CCTV security cameras that we have up there. Behind this gentleman here is one of those artifacts of history. That is actually the original gangway plank from the USS Olympia that carried the World War I unknown from Chalon-sur-Marne, France, here to the Navy Yard in Washington, D.C. in 1921. After the World War I unknown arrived to the Navy Yard in Washington, D.C., he was laid for a 48-hour time frame in the Capitol Rotunda, where roughly 80 to 90,000 citizens could come and pay their respects to him over that 2-day time frame from November 9th to November 11th of 1921. Shortly after that was complete, after his laying state was finished, he was brought by full honors funeral, or caisson, across the Arlington Bridge to the backside of the Memorial Amphitheater, where a full honors funeral was actually conducted and hosted by the President of the United States. Now, this would also be the first time in history that a President of the United States would not only act as the next of kin for an unidentified service member, but also award the Congressional Medal of Honor. Typically, as we know, with active duty service members or next of kins, they're living. But because the service member was unidentified, the President felt it was his sole responsibility to be the representative for that individual. That president was Warren G. Harding. Sorry, I forgot it for a moment. After that after that full honors ceremony was complete, after the individual was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor, he was later interred on the plaza, November 11th, 1921. Previously, they used to actually call it Armistice Day. Today, we now know that is Veterans Day. Now, World War I was the war to end all wars, right? The Great War. As we know, a couple decades later, that did not be so fitting, given that World War II was starting now from 1941 to 1945. The United States military Congress had authorized a 5-year time frame on the back end of World War II for the United States military to go ahead and make their selection process of the World War II unknown. That selection process was actually halted because of the Korean War kicking off from 1950 to 1953. After the Korean War had finished, Congress had authorized an additional 5-year time frame on the back end of that war for the United States military to take another 5-year time frame and make their now double selection of the World War II unknown and Korean War unknown. Now, over here in this picture, you'll see 3 caskets on the USS Canberra. 3 caskets, right? And you're wondering why 3 when there's only 2 wars. All right, 2 individuals, one from the transatlantic and one from the trans-Pacific, actually ended up being both selected to be the representatives for the World War II unknown. Now, one was selected from each of those theaters. There was an individual by the name of Hospital Corpsman William Marcheret, or Hospital Corpsman First Class William Marcheret. He was the only living Navy enlisted sailor who survived the Korean War and who was also a Medal of Honor recipient. He made that final selection of the transatlantic and trans-Pacific unknown right off the coast of the Virginia Capes. The individual not selected had a full honors funeral buried at sea, just 33 miles offshore. To the right, you have the Korean War unknown. He was one of the 4 unknown candidates up for selection, where that final selection process had taken place in Hawaii. The individual was then transported here, where all 3 were gathered. Now what happened was after both individuals had arrived here to the Navy Yard in Washington, D.C., they were both brought to the Capitol Rotunda where they were to lay in state for 48 hours, once again where the public could come and pay their respects. Shortly after that, both individuals were transported by caisson across the Arlington Bridge right here to the backside of the Memorial Amphitheater, where once again a full honors funeral would be conducted and hosted. Now because there were two individuals, you had President Dwight D. Eisenhower, who would act as the next of kin for the World War II unknown, and you would have Vice President Richard M. Nixon, who would act as the next of kin for the Korean War unknown. Both individuals would also be awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor. Later, both individuals would now be interred onto the Plaza 28 May 1958, known as the double internment. Only a couple months later, now the U.S. is seeing itself involved in the Vietnam War. This is a time in history where things are actually changing progressively more with medical advancements and identification process. Congress actually halted the selection process for the Vietnam unknown because each individual that was up for selection kept getting identified. So they designated an individual from the Vietnam War to be the representative by the identification of X-26. After that individual had transferred from Hawaii to California, was brought by an Air Force plane to Andrews Air Force Base right here in DC. That individual was then brought to the Capitol Rotunda, where he would then lie in state for 48 hours. Once again, the public would come and pay their respects over that 2-day time frame. After that was complete, the individual was then loaded onto caisson for a full honors funeral procession to the backside of the Memorial Amphitheater, where President Ronald W. Reagan would act as the next of kin. And once again, the Vietnam unknown would also, like the other unknowns, be awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor. 1984 rolls around, and you now have the Vietnam unknown interred onto the plaza. Now, this is a part of the history where things get very different, because for the next 13, almost 14 years, there would be an individual by the name of Patricia Blassie. She was a captain in the United States Air Force. She had gathered enough evidence to lay claim and request to Congress. My apologies, guys. Patricia Blassie would gather enough evidence to lay claim to Congress and request that they exhumed the Vietnam unknown and conduct further DNA testing. Department of Defense approved this. 1998, they went ahead and exhumed the Vietnam unknown's remains from the plaza, brought the individual to Walter Reed, where they were able to identify a hip bone within that casket, and later identify the Vietnam unknown as her brother, First Lieutenant Michael J. Blassie, who was a U.S. Air Force fighter pilot who actually died abroad. The family decided that after his identification process was complete, they would bring him back to Jefferson Barracks National Cemetery in St. Louis, Missouri, where he lays today. So if you ever get the opportunity to go there, you will see his headstone. And on the back of his headstone, it actually states that he served as a Vietnam unknown. Luckily, he was the last individual from that war to be identified. And we have not had an unidentified service member since. And that is the history of the unknowns. Do you guys have any questions?
I just add that over here is badge number 1, and that's Sergeant Daniels. Sergeant Daniels was my sergeant.
No way.
Yeah.
Master Sergeant William E. Dale was your sergeant?
Yes.
Wow. Wow. You know his grandson came to lay a wreath?
It did?
Yeah, he came here last year to lay a wreath for his father.
That's
his father. It was chilling. Very chilling.
We didn't get to his funeral, but we got to Sergeant Eldridge's funeral. Phil and I and March went to Sergeant Eldridge's funeral. He was Assistant Sergeant Daniels.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. Do you
No,
guys?
just one thing.
No, that's amazing, and I hope that these Tomb Guards and some of the Sentinels inside there can have that privilege, because they met you.
Yep.
They have never met you, and I think that would be amazing for them to do if you're okay with that.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Do you guys have any questions? Do you guys have any questions or anything about?
Were you a Sentinel before you became sergeant?
No, I actually just had the badge pinning ceremony day before yesterday.
So you volunteered for service while you were active duty sergeant?
Correct. So I randomly came on orders. If you're familiar with Army and training locations, I flew out to JRTC in Louisiana for a training cycle, landed on the ground in Louisiana, got off the plane, they said, get back on the plane, you're flying back to Hawaii. Yeah, right? Even had a NyQuil drink on the way back. Got back on the plane, they said, you're on orders to the old guard, got there to presidential caskets. Did Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Congressman John Lewis's funerals.
Wow.
Did a couple ceremonies at the White House with former president. Things like that with COVID relief and whatnot. And then had the opportunity to come try out here. And I have to be 100% honest, this job saved my life. I was going through a very rough patch, and I think that humble reverence. And when you realize that this mission is so much bigger than yourself, you start to not feel sorry for yourself anymore of what you might be going through, and you dedicate that passion, love, and sacrifice to what this mission really entails. And I think that's a story that we continue to try and share for decades before and after us. I came down here as a squad leader, but I didn't take over the position as a relief commander until I passed test 2. After test 2 is when I pretty much got a firm grip on the mission down here, understanding the daily tasks and responsibilities, because the big focus was to focus on testing and that training, right? Get past a certain point, take over the relief, and start to move forward with test 3 and badge test. So there was that lapse in time where I was just acting as an Army squad leader versus a tomb relief commander, right? So the Sentinels, the badge holders before me, were 2 ranks lower than me, were the relief commanders, because they knew the mission more than I did when it came down to the responsibilities and dotting the I's and crossing the T's. So
You'll notice some of the things over the way the tomb guards operate have changed over the years. And I'm not going to talk over the staff sergeant, because everything he's going to tell you, you can hear today only. Anytime you want to talk to me, please, I can give you all the old information, how things have changed. But this is one of the most valuable times in the world to be able to speak to a Sentinel.
No, it's always a pleasure to see you.
It's an honor to be here.
Real quick, I'll
Thank you.
pick you guys up. We'll go through here. I'm going to talk a little bit about the M17 pistols that were gifted to us from 6 Hour in 2018.
The sergeant here is he's showing a handgun that was presented to the tomb guard from the manufacturer. It was a special handgun, special grips on it and everything. And the sergeant, when he changes the guard, will wear that handgun out there. And they felt that this is really something special. So the sergeant was showing it off, and you can see he's hanging onto it with a cloth around it because he doesn't want to get any fingerprints on it or anything else. They're very choice of that. In the background, that extremely tall soldier in the background is training to go out to the tomb. He's doing the manual in front of a mirror, and this is what a trainee for the tomb guard does all the time. You stand in front of the mirror and just keep practicing the manual, practicing facing movements. This is the kind of thing that you do before you can actually go out onto the mat. Let's see, what else have we got on it? Oh, in the background, the sergeant is getting ready to go out and make a guard change. And what happens here is a couple of trainees are helping him do his blousing, checking all of his hardware that he's wearing. You can see him going over the uniform. That's what you do when you're a trainee to go out to the tomb. Now you have to realize how important it is that this is perfect, because he's just getting ready to go out to make a guard change. Let's see what else is going on here. Well, that looks... Oh, there. What you see there is they're using, well, he's showing a handgun here, but obviously you can see that they're very proud of this handgun. But what I was going to show you here is they're going over the sergeant now with masking tape wrapped around their hand to make sure that there isn't any lint on that uniform at all. And it's their responsibility to make sure that his uniform and that he is perfect when he goes out there. They're held responsible for this. Let's see. It looks like he's getting ready to go out for the change. Now he stands in front of the mirror and he checks himself out and makes sure that he's satisfied with what they've done. Now he's ready to make guard change. He's walking past us. And okay, now this is the guard that's going on. They're going to do the same thing with him that they did with the sergeant. They go over him and the same procedure. After they're all done, he'll go to the mirror, check it out and see if he's satisfied with what they've done. You can see him going over him with a tape to make sure that that uniform is perfect. Sergeant's standing right in front of him now, so you can't really see it, but okay, I don't know exactly what he's doing here, but okay, this is one of the trainees. Now he's setting all of this up for the sergeant. He has it all set up on the shelves for him. Again, they're still going over that guard that's going on duty. I don't know exactly what he's got here, but it'd be interesting because they're getting ready right now for a guard change. And they're going to check both of them out before they go out. They'll check the sergeant over, they'll check the guard over, make sure that everything is perfect before they go out there. Oh, incidentally, the sergeant, which is talking right here, right now, he just got his badge. And so he had to go through all of the exams and everything else that you go through in order to get the badge. And as a result, he got his coin, and as he's walking over, he gave me one of his coins, and that's what he was doing. He was just explaining that he had just got his badge. Phil's badge number is 521, and I was one of the original badge holders, so I didn't have a number, but I was one of the original 15 badge holders, and we're on the badge board, on a separate board off to the side for the original badge holders. Then the rest of them are on the major board. This badge, which is rewarded, is the only military decoration which can be revoked. And it can be revoked for anything that they feel brings, how would you say?
Dishonor?
Dishonor to the unknowns. And it can be revoked. Now, of the 603 on the board, there are only 3 that have been revoked. And those numbers are left blank on the board. But all other military decorations cannot be revoked. That goes for the Congressional Medal of Honor. That cannot be revoked because that was awarded for what you had done. And in our case, it can be revoked because it brings dishonor to the unknowns.
The individual who's going up to earn the walk will go on that 21 mat right there 15 minutes prior of that guard change, whether it's half hour or an hour. If there are multiple people trying to go out for a walk, right, they could do something called a hands up. First one of 5 who answers the first 5 questions right, they get it, they get sent on a 3-minute go. They have to change from this to that ceremonial uniform 3 minutes or less. Failure to do so will be the next person in line. Then they will get inspected from head to toe to make sure that their uniform looks right for their test level to go out the door. After they go out the door, then they will get analyzed and actually critiqued by their trainer, come back down, receive their deficiencies after that next guard change, and just kind of build through that process. You break them down to build them up. All right, and that's kind of our big focus here.
Do they have 3 minutes to fully assemble it, or is it just to change into it?
Change into it.
Okay.
Now for the blousing and everything else, that's after they've earned it. They click their heels and say, blouse please, or time or something like that. After that's done, then they get bloused up, then they get out the door, and their training and testing continues. Who's out the door right now, Simpson? Simpson's actually testing. He's actually testing today, and I am gonna go grade him here shortly. His heart and his mind is here in this, and each individual through the testing and training process, you have those 3 pillars of uniform proficiency, outside performance, and knowledge. One person will have one pillar where they're not strong enough. And that's when you really have to work with that trainee to make sure that you're getting them the adequate time and TLC that they need to get through that process. Some people are here on their off days, like Thomas, the individual over there at the table shining his shoes. Today's an off day for him, but he's going to spend it here working on uniform items to make sure that his next work day he could be more proficient than the other walker that he's going against, because those uniforms get inspected at the start of every morning. If their uniforms aren't even good enough in the morning, they're grounded. They're grounded for the day. And they're getting chains all day, they're getting the door all day, and mirror time. And it's not a fun time, because whatever mirror time they don't complete by the end of the cemetery hours doubles. Then you get in ceremonial uniform and you have to do double the mirror time you missed, ceremonially bloused up until it's complete. But then you also have your night hours. So then what, you really have to break it down of what you're gonna do throughout the day to make sure you're being truly proficient. As we were talking about in the brief room, this mission is so different than anything in the world. And this is what we owe to the unknowns and those out there, those Medal of Honor recipients out there that will forever remain unidentified. We need to be the best at our job. And those 26-hour shifts that we do every other day, 3 days a week, you know, could shed no better light than the integrity and intestinal fortitude that a lot of these 19 and 20-year-olds and 21-year-olds, they could be out partying, they could be out having a good old time, enjoying their younger years and ranks in the military, but their hearts and their minds are in a different place, you know, for a mission that, you know, these two fine gentlemen understand and will know, and it's a lifetime commitment that we have before our eyes. So unless you guys have any questions of me, I can't thank you guys enough for coming here today. Thank you for bringing your family. Thank you for bringing your father as well. Sir, it's a privilege and an honor. And I would like to give you this as well.
Thank you.
Yes, you are so welcome. Those coins are given to us after we pass badge testing. And right below in the walker's feet, between the feet, you'll see my badge number on there. It's 702. You have it as well, and I hope that's something that you guys can, of course, appreciate. Yep. And then if you ever want to put in an order,
Yeah.
I can get you in touch with Dave Hathaway
I would love that.
to do that. Yes. Yeah. So they're getting ready to walk in because they're bringing tons of stuff.